Well, thank you guys for showing up to Monday night's deep dive.
Good to be here.
We'll just go straight in. So Sunday's sermon is reset your, I almost said wishes, not wishes, riches. And the message was not about money, but what someone treasures deeply in their heart. Then the series went over to 3 areas of focus for vision, which is your next step, the next generation, and our next door neighbors. So what is a next step? And Preston, you said it was a next step is a way to communicate the idea of taking a step forward in our faith, whether through worship, serving, or giving. It's a way to challenge ourselves to grow and deepen our relationship with God. So the sermon mentions specific actions that can be considered next steps, like reading the Bible or joining a life group. Why are these steps important for a believer's growth?
Yeah, I think we kind of identified, Chris and I were texting last week when we were kind of putting this together on, if we're going to be talking about next steps for the next year, we need to get clear about what are we really asking people to do. And so it was kind of like these 3 outcomes. So if it leads to these 3 things, we believe that is a next step, right? Which would be to grow in your faith, to engage in the life of the church, and then to live out what you believe. And so some of those things are very personal, like, personal Bible reading and times of prayer, all those kind of things. And many of them are communal. How do I become engaged in the life of the church through serving, life group, those kind of things, community group. So that's the 3 outcomes. Sorry, I got a little sidetrack there. Yeah, the three outcomes of like a next step is what we're looking at, is those 3 things. And
so is it the importance of those 3 things? Like, why those 3? Like,
I think that was just somewhat an easy way to like boil it down.
Oh, okay.
Because sometimes, which I mentioned this in the message too, that sometimes in church world, we use language and words that don't really mean much anywhere else. And so I think I use the example, like, you don't go to Taco Bell and order your food and then they tell you to take your next step.
Take your next step.
And so it's like, that's pretty specific to the church world. And so just trying to put language to it that's simple for anybody to know. So again, just grow in your faith, engage in the life of the church, live what you believe. Those are things that if they lead you to that, then that is a next step.
Yeah.
And I thought one of the big or the important things was really setting up some way to have a metric too.
Yeah.
I think that was a big deal when we were talking about like defining your next steps. We put things out a lot of what good next steps would be, but we don't really quantify what the benefit is. So if you're trying to figure out what your next step is, ask yourself, how is it helping in these 3 areas? And if you can't really explain or define why it's helping in these 3 areas, maybe that's not the most ideal next step for you.
Yeah, like it needs to be able to come natural, organic.
Well, and it gives you an attainable goal. I think going into Bible reading, if you're going to engage in Bible study, you need to seek out, like, how is this helping me live out what I believe? How is this strengthening me? How is it helping me engage in church culture? It kind of sets up the why for all of those practices.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think even in like the leadership side of stuff, church leadership world, whatever, you're trying to help people along, everybody on the same journey, but starting from different places and with different backgrounds and different levels of even growth and maturity already and all those different things. And so kind of getting that common language is the thing that it doesn't really matter where you are in your path of discipleship to Jesus. There's something everybody can do to grow in our faith and to engage in the life of the church differently and then live what you believe.
I was about to say, I kind of like how you said, it boils it down and gives you some kind of metric. I was going to say, because it's, I feel like especially for new believers, the whole church thing and all that's very intimidating, and they don't really know where to start. So I feel like that across the board, kind of like you were saying, for if you've been a believer for 20 years or you just started yesterday, I think that's a good thing to have.
Intimidating is a good word. It does help make a lot of those steps seem less intimidating.
You guys are speaking about it being intimidating. So the next question actually is, what are some common barriers people face when taking their next step. I know, like for me, it was removing distractions. We talked about, the 15 minutes a day, wake up early, make that and be intentional with it. So what are some other things that you guys see, we've thrown around the word church world, as a common barrier, and how can they overcome them?
Well, I have two that kind of come to mind pretty quickly. One would be just, you don't know what you don't know. Right. So if somebody doesn't know what steps to take, or doesn't have somebody they're kind of following and discipling under, to help show them the way and guide them along, you don't know what you don't know. So that's a huge barrier. But the other one I think is kind of really gets back to the heart of the message, is just value. What do you value growing in your faith? Do you value engaging in the church? Do you value living what you believe? And until we do that, until we've come to a place where, like, I recognize in myself things need to change if I'm going to intentionally live my life in a way that looks more like Jesus. Until I come to that place of valuing that, then that's a huge barrier. It's probably the biggest barrier to me.
Yeah. All right. So we went into Vision Rally. Well, we had a Vision Rally last night, and it was the coolest thing ever.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
And of course, I got emotional over it, But so I have to ask, what sparked the idea of a Vision Rally?
Honestly, just my own experience from where I was before I moved over here. The church I was a part of, that just became a part of the yearly rhythm of kind of setting up the church for the next year in November. And that would always kick off the Vision series and stuff in the church with Vision Rally, which really the heart behind it is just celebrate the people that make the church, because, as a staff and team, we do a lot of different things and a lot of stuff that people see all the time, but it's the people of the church that often make everything happen, and the stuff that people don't even see all the time, but they get to be the product, they get to enjoy the product of everybody's work, So with Vision Rally, it really was, especially with this kind of being my first, year, moving into the first year, being here at the church, just thought it'd be a great idea to kind of take that same idea that I got to be a part of over there and just bring our church together, look ahead to the next year, celebrate the previous year and the people of the church. And I said that last night, that I think a miss in a lot of churches today, or just in Christianity today, is that we don't celebrate all that well, and I don't know. I just think that's something we should always be trying to do as much as we can, because we have a lot to celebrate.
Yeah.
So.
I was gonna say, it gives like this boost of like, wow, I'm making an impact. Whether it's not something that we look for or whatnot, but it's just like when it's recognized or whomever, man, I can attest that it just gave me an overwhelming amount of emotion that I was like, man, like people notice this stuff, and even though I'm tracking with trying to get the word out as much as possible with in Christ, and try to get that just Christ filled with hearts, but then having that recognition is just a whole nother level of
And it was really perfect timing too, because really before you came on full time, when we were coming to a lot of the staff meetings and we were wrestling through what we were doing as a church, we were talking about our annual harvest time and how we can be more intentional with what it's focused toward. And we were talking about the vision for the next year. We were talking about volunteer engagement and recognition, and really that idea of Vision Rally made all of those pieces come together. So they came together, and it was way more intentional. It was way more focused, and we were able to put all these little pieces together and consolidate them into something really cool. Because I think that there areas of recognition were happening in teams informally, just here and there, but it really wasn't being presented as a huge win and a huge celebration to everyone, and to help everyone rally around that and to get behind it and get behind not just the vision and not just what we're doing as a church, but around each other.
Yeah. One of the things I've always been taught is gratitude is never silent. So, if you're grateful for somebody or, the whole church or whatever, then be loud about it. The best place to be is on somebody's mind. So when you have gratitude for somebody and you're thinking of somebody and you're grateful for them, then let them know and do it big and let them know right then.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely.
We got a pretty good sized church in which I haven't been part of this church for a long time, but it's I don't know. I still don't know everyone, but even more so outside of like worship, what I'm a part of. So it's nice to see those people who really have those impacts in those different areas of ministry in the church, and kind of get an idea of who they are, what they're about, and what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to hear some of the stories of those other areas of ministry, I mean, we know there's stuff happening with the kids and in production and with life groups, but you don't get to hear those stories all the time. And when you hear the stories and the impact and the people that are serving in those areas, it's really neat.
Yeah. So how do you believe understanding one's purpose can impact an individual's life and role within the church and in their community?
Yeah. So for those who may be listening that didn't make it to Vision Rally, we were just talking about that last night, that I believe there is a problem in the world or in the church that every believer was designed from the very beginning to bring a solution to. And so God has placed in each one of us natural gifts, spiritual gifts that come as we, place our faith in Christ, that God's intent is for us to find deep purpose in building his kingdom here on earth. And this even goes all the way back to what we talked about in the good life, right? That we're building the kingdom. That is our primary purpose and primary focus in the whole world, in all of our existence, right? That's our primary role and primary purpose, is to bring good works that build the kingdom. And then I said last night that I believe that the church should be the primary place that we're able to discover that God-given purpose, because everything that we do in here is a place for us to practice what we do out there. And so we even sometimes in the church, we create even opportunities to just practice these things. And sometimes we practice those in conversations and in serving and just various different things throughout the church for the sake of equipping all of us to go out there and then live out this purpose in our everyday life. So.
Yeah. You guys have anything else?
Well, I didn't mean to dominate that answer.
No, that was good.
No, I totally agree, because whenever we talk about purpose, I mean, you had told me like years and years ago, I don't remember it was like a threefold pattern of where your passions, your giftings, and another part of your lives intersect.
Oh, intersect.
Intersect. And it's like something really clicks at that moment. It's like you feel what you were created for. You feel that divine purpose that God created you to serve in.
Yeah.
And because you do have the natural giftings, you have spiritual gifts, and there's needs in the world, and you have inclinations that you are drawn to. And and the church is a wonderful place to find those. And when you do, it is like you found your purpose, like you found home. And especially whenever you see the fruit of that effort bringing change in your own life and other people's lives, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Nothing like it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, that's all I've got. You guys got anything else? All right. All right, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Earlier we talked about some of the examples and steps that the congregation can take, or those who are new to the faith, or even we'll call them seasoned veterans in this. But what would someone's practical next steps be?
Well, I think it's important to ask, because everyone's asking those things. And oftentimes, like we were saying, like Preston was saying, in the church world, we just say next steps without tacking on like really what that means. And when we were talking off camera, like Tyler was bringing up some great real life situations he runs into all the time. Like if you want to share something like that.
Yeah. I've had a lot of experience with youth groups and kind of teenage groups, and a lot of them really, they're starting to explore their faith and what they believe, and they're wanting to be invested, but they're not sure exactly how to do that. It's can be as easy to say, well, you just need to read your Bible. How do I do that? where do I start? Do I start from Genesis? Do I start from New Testament? Simple things.
Open the book
simple
and
questions
right
like
there.
yeah. But one of the things I've found, it's kind of like we're talking about with Vision Rally. We want to talk about the wins.
Mhm.
I think it's important to talk about next steps. It's okay to take small steps,
Mhm.
small steps that are achievable. And once they're achieved, they're those little wins that you can celebrate. And that just encourages you more to keep taking those next steps.
Yeah, which I believe even Preston talked about. What was in the description of what does small steps look like? You know, when you take those large leaps, there's more margin or there's more error possibility.
Yeah.
You know, but taking those small steps, creating those milestones, it can definitely keep propelling you to move forward. You know, even I believe Dave Ramsey talks about, you know, making these take out the snowball effect,
Mhm.
right? So,
I think, like with what Tyler was saying, with a lot of the questions that people are often asking, especially youth, wondering about, well, sure, I need to read my Bible. How do I start? Now, if the next step is reading my Bible, where do I even begin? And that could be applied to any next step. And
Mhm.
that's where I think a lot of what Preston had in the messaging that of Sunday morning with the next step, especially when the scripture about the rich young ruler,
mhm.
whenever Preston talked about Jesus being central, not additional. And whenever we look at things like that, we have to quantify and ask ourselves really what good is it that we're trying to achieve? Like just like whenever he posed that question, and then Jesus said, "Why do you call me good? God alone is good."
Mhm.
So there's a lot of times whenever we're trying with our next steps to earn something, and maybe even earn our salvation or prove ourselves as good or something like that. And that's where I love where Preston said that that salvation is inherited, not merited. It's not something we can earn. And that's so often where I think we get off on a wrong
Mhm.
track, is wondering like, we need to do these next steps to make ourselves good, when in
Yeah.
actuality, Jesus' sacrifice, what he did, we are made righteous in him. Everything being in him, being a child of God, the goodness is inherited. So then at that point, all of our next steps are really to anchor ourselves in the centrality of Jesus and who he's called us to be. And he's called us to be followers. And then that gets into that question of how to take that next step. Well, we're called to be followers. That's the model that we see in the New Testament.
Mhm.
So really that's where discipleship comes into play, where we have to lean on other trusted people who are a few steps ahead of us. And then they can actually help guide us. They can show us, well, hey, if you want to get into reading the Bible, here's how you start. Here's some things you need to understand. Here's how the Bible's laid out. Here's how it's structured. Here's the context of it. Here's some study tools. You need people like that in your life. And that's
Yeah.
what being a follower and following, helping lead others is all about.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know, when you're talking about when Jesus said, "What makes me good?" You know, I wonder what the guy was trying to think of, like to say to Jesus.
Yeah.
What makes you? What does he mean? Like, is he
Is this a
is he
rhetorical
not like
question?
the thief? Like what? Or is he like, is this a trick question? Is he? You know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think definitely even for me, like when I first started, it was like I didn't know where. I went straight to the pastor. You know, I was like, hey, what would be a good book to you? And of course, this is when I went to my different church, and they told me to start in the book of John, because they call it the book of love, because that's, you know, John's emphasizing or highlighting what Jesus has done.
Mhm.
And there's like different themes for each, like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And then of course, you know, I get the pleasure to talk to you, so I'm gleaning so much information. And of course, my studies went through the roof, all because I was asking questions. And I think even a good practical step would be to ask questions, and don't guard yourself, or don't be reserved about your questions, because for you to honestly follow, you have to be honest with your questions, and you have to be intentional seeking these answers. And there could be difficult questions that may not get answered, but you're asking them and you're trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And that's a good point, to where our next steps can't always just be inwardly focused.
Mhm.
And that's even where you see Zacchaeus operating in the Message Sunday. He had next steps, but his next steps also impacted other people. And so that's what it means with leading and following. So there's oftentimes that when we're quantifying what a next step is, part of that definition was a step to engage in the church. So you might need to ask yourself, how can I take a next step to help someone else to grow as a leader, to grow as a teacher, to mentor someone else? And sometimes that means you need to reach out to someone a few steps ahead and say, hey, how can I get plugged into helping some of these kids, to helping some of these people who want to start learning this or leading worship a certain way. So,
yeah, I was going to say that was actually going to be part of my little thing I threw out there is like finding someone that you feel comfortable engaging with and relating to on these things, just to talk. Now, it doesn't have to be necessarily someone that teaches you these things, but someone you just talk to and just ask questions, and that's part of, the whole thing with the church. It's about relationship. It's about community.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Do you guys, anything else to add on that one? I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, that was good. I think that was helpful.
Yeah, definitely. There was something else too. What you said, Tyler, was like you can, and what you said, Chris, is to ask these questions, and it's not so much of an inward focus, but definitely branch out and get the all walks of life. Because as someone who, for myself, I would not even put myself in an intermediate. I'm still a novice, I think. But I'm still asking people that are alongside with me, or talking with people that are a little bit, just beginning. Because I can't think of the technique it's called, but you also can learn by teaching. Yeah. So, and then of course, I get to talk to elders, and I hate your camera, so I'm not trying to.
It's all good.
There's not an earthquake, I promise. But yeah. So, and last night we had the vision rally, and he also spoke of vision, or Preston spoke of vision in the sermon. So for our church, what is the vision?
Yeah, that's the neatest one of the neatest things I think about Vision Rally is that we're having, as we'd said earlier, the vision piece is, you have the rally and you have the vision series that we're doing on Sunday mornings. And then it's coinciding with our harvest offering, which is raising resources, going above and beyond to give to that vision. So they're all coming together and consolidating into one thing. And so for us, the vision series of next, that's the theme. And we're talking about your next step, the next generation, and our next door neighbors. So those are going to be the areas of ministry focus that our vision is going to point toward. And then, of course, the vision rally last night was really galvanizing around that vision. It's gathering all of our people as a church body, as a community that we're presenting this message to. And really, it's a call to action. So it's about recognizing the volunteers that are going above and beyond, that are already contributing to this mission, and let them be an example to really the whole church about like how we're all called to serve. We're all called to have a purpose. Let's put our purpose and our calling toward this vision.
Yeah. That's definitely, when I spoke it earlier, saying, when the church is recognizing the efforts, because we covered the three. We covered there was projects. Mm-hmm. There was one. There was, I believe it said community.
Projects, partners, and
people.
Right.
Yep. So, and then Preston mentioned about the local aspects of things, about Camp Allen, mm-hmm. and then there was the
So really the projects, partners, and people, those are the three focus areas that we're devoting the harvest offering to. Mm. And it might sound a little bit confusing, but those three areas that we're devoting those resources to are specifically focused on the next vision. So like our projects is all built around Hilltop Kids, making a safe, fun, loving environment for all of our kids here at Liberty Hill that we haven't been able to really develop out in previous years. So that's a next generation focus, and it's about equipping them for their next steps. And then you have our partners, which would be Sauter County Children's Home and Camp Allen. Mm-hmm. They also are very much focused on the next generation, and also next door neighbors. They're reaching out to those people next door. And then people were specifically focusing on a love offering for someone in the church who is really serving in a strong area in this vision area, like whether it be next steps, next door neighbors, or next generation, who needs help that we can come along and support in a strong way.
Yeah.
And so those are the areas of focus for the harvest offering, built around the vision for next year being next, which is all being galvanized in our community base at Vision Rally. That's how it all fits together.
Well, it's like there's like a theme with all of it, which is the next generation. Because I mean, when you focus on the next door neighbor, you're making an impact there, but you're also that you could be leaving an impact down to the youth as well, and they can see that, and then that's another effect. That's just like the projects, which is Hilltop, which is youth, which is next gen.
Mm-hmm.
So that's amazing, like how it all just ties together. So
it's a lot of moving pieces, but it all does tie together. Around that one central idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think so.
What did Vision Rally, like, again, with the idea of not trying to be the interviewer, but with the idea of really galvanizing and rallying the church community around a specific vision to find that purpose, to connect. I mean, you guys are above and beyond high capacity volunteers. What does that mean for you, and how did it impact you, or what did you see out of Vision Rally?
For me, it's encouraging in a way, because I know that I'm serving in a place that has a vision. It's kind of like how Paul says, he's talking about how his dad would tell him, how do you know if God's speaking to you if you're not in his word? You and the rest of the staff, it's encouraging, because I can tell you guys you're living out the word and living out what you believe, because you guys have come together with this God-given vision for the church. And that's encouraging, just to know that us volunteers are in good hands.
Well, that's good to know. I mean, that is one of the big things with Vision Rally too, was to somewhat model on a larger scale kind of how we try to operate as a staff. Kind of like Preston mentioned in our staff panel, every staff meeting, we start with worship. We go to the pivot area and we put on 2 worship songs and we worship together. And then we gather around in a huddle and we go over our wins. We go over prayer requests. We celebrate wins. We pray for concerns, people in need, and then we go and we do business after that. So, but that's a big focus where we want to. It starts with whatever we want to see embodied in church culture. It starts with us, and we have to model that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to just add to about what you were saying. When everything was going on and what it meant to me, I kind of explained a little bit earlier, but also too, I got to see a lot of what is being preached come to life. Mm-hmm. When a church invests heavily into their volunteers, you get to see the scripture that we're learning and that's preached about just animate. And it's just, it's an amazing feeling to see and hear, and everyone was there to just be a part of it. Mm-hmm. And it didn't feel like community. It felt like we were a giant. I don't know. We felt like a body. It felt like we were all one.
Cliche to say family, but it felt
it felt like a family, but like we all had the same vision.
And the worship aspect of it was really great too. I mean, like, you guys were up on stage leading worship, but from out in the congregation side, it did seem like there was a lot of engagement, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of people active singing. I don't know how much you could hear on stage, especially with your in-ears, but it seemed very engaging.
Yeah, it's encouraging to see that. I know I ran to Preston's daughter the other day when I was leaving church, and her friend now stopped and was like, "It's really cool to see y'all just worshiping, because you don't really see a whole lot of kids in their age engaging worship." Yeah. But no, while I was playing, I looked over, I noticed them like in the second row. I was like, "That's just really cool to see."
I give props to Brandon Horton and his team in Pivot, because they have been, whenever I sat in Pivot, I was blown away at the worship culture in there. And Brandon talked about how a while back it wasn't like they weren't super engaged in it. And he worked to really promote and teach what worship is and what a worship culture is and what that means, and develop that and model that. And you can see the fruit of that. Those kids, whenever I sit in Pivot, are all in, and they're all in when they're sitting out there worshiping with you guys too. So that's just neat to see. And that's a little bit part of that idea of we as leaders, what we model is what everyone observes, and that sets something for people to see and work on. And it starts to develop that culture.
Yeah.
What there was something talked about like the foundation, and I'm still trying to understand how I like to, because I heard at my old church as well, is like they're like flipping of the foundation is the volunteer, or maybe I'm getting that mixed up. I'm not sure what I'm even trying to ask.
I think I remember.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand. Like it was
I think what Preston was saying, kind of with the pyramid visual, with him being at that single point, but he can't do that alone. So think of it upside down. Him in that single point, and all of us just kind of toppling on him. It's kind of like I think of kind of like a work environment. I see a lot of I guess toxic employers, something like that. And I really think employees have, I won't say they have power over them, but I mean, without the people under you, there's not really a whole lot that people up top can really do, So really, Preston's our lead pastor, but it's kind of one of those, he needs us just as much as we need him.
Well, and he can't, like whether you imagine as a pyramid or like an inverted pyramid, and that's, I think, where it gets into a little bit of that thought process. If everything solely resides on one person's shoulders, it's lopsided and it can't balance.
Yeah.
So, but whenever everything is built on a strong foundation, then it has stability.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like saying he can't be in every ministry in every place at the same time. That's why it's important to have willing volunteers to really step up to the plate and take care of things that need to be taken care of.
And in those areas, like what he's in, to set the example, to model, to communicate what our culture should be, where we feel God's leading us, where he feels God set the vision for Liberty Hill, and model all of those things in a godly way. And then we develop leaders, we develop people, and we set up that path of discipleship to where all levels of the church community embody that and establish that foundation.
That's awesome. Well, that's all I've got. You want to try this again? 1, 2, 3.